This one's for Bill Walton, noted deadhead. If my windless streak it had continued, then my seat at Penske wouldn't be secure. Would you believe I won a gateway? Would you treat it legit? I was fast in all of it. It's a hand-me-down win. Seabell's car was broken. Perhaps Blaney's crew didn't get it fooled. I don't know. Don't really care. I put the number 2 into the playoffs there.
Yeah.
I mean, I can make 2 jokes about you. We're talking about deadheads. We got a guy who might be dead soon, and then how every time I hear your voice, Massie, singing, you make me feel dead. So welcome on in.
Takes the breath out of your lungs.
It's just so magical, I guess. That's the one way to put it. Welcome on in to the Happy Hour podcast. My name is Trey Lyle, one half or 1/3 of your hosting trio. Joining me as he does, singer-songwriter and soccer mom haircut enthusiast Michael Massie. And joining us as he has past couple of weeks from Sirius XM, Davey Segal at Davey Center. And then our grumpy old man who decided to get off his lawn, his porch, to rant about a few things in NASCAR. If I had it my way, but we have to deal with algorithms, folks, I would have called this Old Man Rants About NASCAR. That'd be more about Massie, but this guy falls in that category too. Mr. Michael Neff, Mike Neff, M Neff Short Track on Twitter. Neff, how are you doing? And welcome back to Happy Hour.
Glad to be here. Missed you guys. Thanks for having me back in. I got a little bit of a hitch in my giddy up, but it's getting better. Had the left knee replaced on May 8th. And walking around, no cane, no walker, any kind of old man implements. And the right knee will be done on July 8th. So I will have 2 fresh balonies by the time we get around to Darlington in September.
Sounds like a new man to me. It is Mike Neff. As always, you can subscribe to this our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Frontstretch. If you're on our Facebook page, like our Facebook page. If you're listening through the podcast feed, we love those people as well. Subscribe to the Frontstretch Podcast Network. Leave us that 5-star review. Throughout the show, leave your thoughts in the comments. We had a vibrant Frontstretch garage this past week. Last week, we talked about some fun things. We'll talk about the waiver again. I know that was a hot topic. We'll talk that towards the end of the show, and then we'll tease a much-needed segment that is coming back probably next week. We'll tease that as our bonus content this week as a heads up. But first, sit back, relax, crack open that cold one, unless you're Caleb Barnes, who's helping me out behind the scenes this week or joins us a couple weeks because he is 20 years old, or if you're driving, of course, because here at frontstretch.com, we respect responsible drinking here as well. But let's get right into it, starting with Mr. Neff. And you were not happy about the amount of laps or miles that were in St. Louis this past weekend. No. It was 300 miles. Go ahead.
I've made this comment forever. Everybody loves to harass me about it. I know I am in the minority, but I have always maintained that all Cup races should be at least 500 miles. Yes, that would be 993 laps at Martinsville. We would have to change brakes during the race. It would make a whole new level of competition. But the whole premise of racing at this level is that it is a true test of man and machine. Who's getting tested in 300 miles? Anybody that got out of a car this weekend didn't even have a sweat going on. There was no test of man. We did actually manage to test a machine because Mr. Bell's car proceeded to die on us. We also tested man's ability to do math because apparently Blaney's folks can't calculate gas mileage. But in reality, I mean, this isn't a road course, for God's sakes. I understand we don't want to do 500 miles on a road course because we're all a bunch of wussies and we can't handle that. But as far as a cup race, 300 laps, that's an Xfinity race, if not even a truck race. Come on now. I understand it's the modern generation that can't have long attention. Our network partners don't want to go over 3 hours, but 300 is ridiculous. We can do better.
Oh, I missed you, old man. I really did. How you been?
You, my tire-sitting friend. I am so glad to see you with us tonight.
Good to see you too. So whenever I'm with Neff or talking to Neff, which I wish was more often, I'll just say that tangentially, it always comes back to this debate about the 500 miles everywhere, which is just a ludicrous take. Ludicrous. We can all agree on that, besides Neff.
We'd still be watching some races right now if it was 500 miles.
That's 1,000 laps to Martinsville.
Be in the mid 2000s at this point because we'd still be trying to finish a race somewhere somehow. But that's besides the point. I'll grant you that Gateway is one of the shorter races of the year. I mean, 45 laps for an opening stage feels like a truck or an Xfinity stage.
Yes.
So I'll grant you that. But the days of man and machine being tested have been over for a long time. And I'm not going to pretend to be the old head here because we know that Massie's that guy this week. That was
every week
when, man and machine were being tested on a week-to-week basis, when the Coke 600 was a true test of man and machine, when equipment wasn't as reliable as it is now, which is kind of ironic considering, to Neff's point, Bell's engine expired a little bit early this past weekend. Trey, I have no idea what's going on with your hair, but you look like
don't either.
Rocker. Go ahead and fix that so you can distract me a little bit more. Thank you. Where was I? Yes, the mileage. The test of man and machine has not been a test for, guys, I don't know, at least 10 or 15 years, right? And every now and then someone's power steering belt breaks and you got to manhandle the car around the racetrack, or it's a really hot day and everybody gets out the car and they are wiped and the infield care center is flooded with drivers trying to get fluids and replenish themselves after a race. So I will grant you that Gateway, Worldwide Technology Raceway, whatever we want to call it, is one of the shorter weekends and shorter races of the year. But Neff, you said it yourself, man. TV networks drive these things. The younger generation.
Unfortunately, that's part of the problem.
Yes, totally don't agree with you there. The younger generation, like Massie's the old man, but Trey and myself, that's who NASCAR is going for. And most people that are around or at our age don't have a long attention span. I'll put my hand up and put myself in that category to a certain extent. And whether you like it or not, and we know that, Neff, you don't, that's the way that it has been for the last several years. And Trey, I think that's going to be the way that it's going to be going forward, especially given that Prime, a streaming service, which kind of caters to a younger audience statistically, going to have 5 races there. And obviously you're going to have a different television partner coming in next year in Turner Sports and Warner Brothers too. So this is not changing anytime soon. And for the record, I'm fine with that. I'm cool with what we got now. Shorter is better in terms of races and season length. And I'll die on that hill.
So
Wait, you're wanting the season to get cut short too?
Absolutely. It's way too long. I would say it's a month or two too long. Never going to happen, but 30 races is fine.
38 weeks with one off week. It's the longest season in sports. Like,
give the people more of what they crave. Okay, less is more.
I mean,
48 weeks. Let's go.
I will
break a month off at Christmas.
As Davey works for a broadcast partner, I will say this: I guarantee you, they will not cut the weeks short. Like, they'll expand it if that, because that means more money for them. Neff, you're insane. I just want to point that out. Like, one, Davey, of course, going with the short attention span as he is a TikTok superstar. We all know this.
Don't do that anymore, but thank you.
You still, in my eyes, you always will be. But there needs to be a perfect balance. I think the 600 and the Daytona 500, the Southern 500, the Brickyard 400, like, those are the only links in my mind that need to be concrete. Everything else can change. 300 laps, I don't think so. 400 laps, maybe if you had 100 more laps that race, sure. But I mean, we had a really compelling finish in the 300 laps, and you have, I think if that, if it's 100 laps more, Ryan Blaney probably doesn't run out of gas, and maybe stinks it up. We got a compelling finish because of how it was set up. So 500 miles is mentally insane. Like let's preface that. In a place like Martinsville or Richmond or any short track. But if you want to do like a minimum of like if it's a short track or under a mile and a half, you do, minimum of 400 laps, then I'm okay with that. And then you stick every cup race is between 4 and 450 outside of the Southern 500, Brickyard 400, the Coke 600 and the Daytona 500. I think I'd be okay with that because I don't think we need these constant 500-mile races because they run too long.
Yeah, I'm somewhere in the middle. Like 300 does feel really short because it is it's an Xfinity or truck distance. So maybe you could do 400, but I've always been of the mindset that if people are wanting less of something, less of a track, less laps there, it's not that good a track. Like the 600 now, that ran almost 400 miles, and we wanted more. We weren't like, that's a good distance call because Charlotte's really good right now. And so Gateway, in my opinion, has 300 miles too long of cup cars going around it. And we shouldn't have cup cars there at all because that race was boring for 90% of it. But into the whole race distance thing, I'm kind of with you, Trey, on the majors, the crown jewels, I guess, should be the 500 milers, the longer distance races. And, that's the traditionalist thing. Like people point to the 80s and 90s. Like that's when it started having all these 500-mile races for the 80s and 90s. Before that, you'd have all these little bull rings, and then you go to a super speedway, and that'd be where you'd have the 500-mile race, and it would be a big deal. And that's why the endurance came into question because they're not doing 500 miles every week.
Right.
So I think if you have shorter races throughout the year and the special races are longer, then you will have more of that man machine thing because people aren't, they're not building their car every week to last 500 miles. So when a 500-mile race creeps up, they're not as used to building that type of car with that kind of endurance. But I don't know. I just, if the racing's good, I want more of it. If it's bad, I want less of it. And we shouldn't be having a schedule of like all 300-mile races because if we are, that means that the racing is not good.
They need to be diverse. Yeah, and Noah brings up a good comment here. New Hampshire has always been 300 miles or 301 to be exact. So get the lobster, and going 300 miles. Like that's a fair point. I think you just need a perfect mix. Like, one thing, if you want to, some of these races have just drawn out too long and they're not entertaining. There's a reason there's a pitch clock in baseball now. It's to make now
you're going to get baseball in on it and make me mad about that too.
Well, I think about it like this, like a big, someone who was more traditional to baseball, if you want to compare, like pitch clock worked because on a weekday night in the summer, a family could go to a game and they'd be home in a reasonable time. Well, if you're going to keep doing these afternoon starts to races, well, families need to be home in a right time. And, you think about how long it would take to get out of the track, you're going to add 2 hours to that, depending on where you're coming from. Like if you have a reasonable time with your race, then you're going to have more families come to it because they can make it work on a Sunday evening or a Sunday afternoon and so on and so forth. Yes, there needs to be a distinguishment from the Xfinity series and the Truck series in terms of endurance. Like it's just essentially like, all right, each weekend you add up, it's 100 laps ish more, depending on what it is. And maybe because Gateway is just so unique in terms of its track, it needed 100 more laps, but I don't think New Hampshire needs 100 more laps. Like going back to the, the Almirola win and Bell closing in. Like that would have been interesting if it just went to its normal distance. It obviously didn't because of, there's no lights there. So I think it depends on the track. It depends on the race. But yeah, maybe yesterday could have used 100 more laps. But honestly, it was hard to pass there. So why does it need 100 more laps? Let's wrap up this with Ginny's comment. They could go back to green flag, checkered flag, and maybe the racing would not drag out as long. I guess getting rid of stages is what she's talking about there. But let's move on to our next topic. And
7-lap cautions first.
Yeah.
Let's get rid of 7-lap cautions. That would be a great advantage.
Neff is on a heater today, folks. So if you are just turning in, Michael Neff is
not
on
just
a heater.
today. This is
every day.
This is how I live.
No, it is true. I mean, we're gonna get to the greatest race car driver ever. Not
anytime
at the end of the show. We're gonna talk about that in a moment. But let's talk about something interesting that happened with Austin Cindric's win. It now brings a playoff, a driver that is outside of the top 16 points into the playoffs to go along with Daniel Suarez. And there are some interesting names below the cut line, aren't there now, Davey Segal?
There sure are, Mr. Trey Lyle. Joey Logano is one of them, even though he won the All-Star race. Kyle Busch, one of them, even though he won at Gateway last year and was running inside the top 10 before he and the other Kyle got in a bit of a tete-a-tete. And Chase Briscoe is one now as well, who obviously Stewart Haas Racing closing the doors at the end of the year. I found it interesting what he said today on Sirius Guys, basically that, he and Austin Cindric are good friends. They're Ford teammates. They go way back to the BKR days. So he's very happy for him that he won because he's seen him kind of struggle. But at the same time, that knocks him out of a playoff spot. So he's obviously not looking too great right now. So the fact that we have two former champions, two-time champions, the only two-time champions currently running full-time in NASCAR below the cut line, Massie, I think that speaks volumes to where those teams are at right now. And with only 10 races to go in the regular season, a road course in there, a couple super speedways in there, I think that it may be close to start to worry. I wouldn't say it's panic time necessarily, but honestly, if you're the 22 and you're the 8, you got to start to thinking, okay, we kind of need to start to change our approach here because whatever we're doing right now is not getting the job done.
So for Joey Logano, I've had this attitude all year for him that's like, it's not time to panic. Like, it's not time for him to get going yet. Just because he's so, he always gets going at the end of the year, like his championship year 2 years ago, or even his first championship. Like, you kind of wrote him off until the end of the year. I still think he's going to sneakily find a way to win a race before the playoffs, get his way in there, especially with Penske is kind of stepping things up now. The two of the best cars on the day were Penske cars. I don't know what Joey Logano was doing. I guess he was just taking a week off or something on being good. But yeah, I still I'm not panicking on Logano yet because he's too crafty. He's too good. Kyle Busch, though, if you'd said this a couple years ago, I thought you were crazy, but I don't think he's going to make the playoffs. Just the way things are going there, like his general attitude. I mean, you could look at the All-Star race where he's saying, hey, we both suck. Like, he's not excited he wrecked today. They did a test at Indianapolis today and he wrecked it. So just the way things are going, like, he could have had a good points day on Sunday, but instead he lost his cool and him and Larson got into a peeing match, I guess would be the G-way calling it, and it ended up with Kyle Busch out of the race. I don't think he's going to make it, but more important than that for him is the win streak of 19 straight years of the win. Because even if he makes the playoffs, he's not doing anything. I think he'd be the first round exit. But that win streak, that's NASCAR history right there. He's the greatest ever at that with the 19 straight years with a win. And that's in serious jeopardy. And that's the thing I'm more concerned about. For the other guys, like, I don't know, Briscoe with the team falling apart, I just can't see him making it. Like, and then farther below that, those guys, They would
They'll
really
need a win.
They need a win, a Hail Mary kind of deal.
Now you look at it. I think Briscoe could get in because of road courses. He's a good road course racer, and on any given weekend that can happen. Logano, I think, has got the cars. It's just a matter of the weekend lining up right for him. So I think he'll get a win in before playoffs. But I'm with you. Kyle's head is not where it needs to be. And you saw it after this weekend. He's more worried about the win streak than the playoffs. And that's not a championship mindset. That's
He said so.
Me mindset. And to be fair, their problem is they've been shooting themselves in the foot quite a bit this year. They've had some fast cars. They've been running top 5, top 7, top 8, and then had a penalty on pit road or had a miscue on pit road. And that is what has been really biting them. I still think the difference now in the way we choose a champion is you get somebody that gets on a heater over the last 4 weeks of the regular season, knocks out a win, maybe 2, goes into that first round, wins one of the first 3. That momentum has already come to them. And to harken back, it means Tony Stewart did it. Tony Stewart, when he tied Carl Edwards, was running like a bag of hammers most of that season. And after Martinsville, he's like, you better watch out. And sure enough, he goes on a tear through the playoffs, got in Carl's head and beat him. And for those folks that don't remember back in the day of the chase before we had playoffs, this is what Jimmy Johnson used to do every year. They'd win 3 races in the first month and a half of the year and then run like complete garbage until 4 weeks before the chase. And then all of a sudden they'd go win the championship. It's different because I don't think Kyle Busch is experimenting with anything. I think he's running terrible. I think Logano might be experimenting a little bit because of the way the other Penske cars are running. And that's why I think he's still going to grab a win and get in. The Briscoe thing is just going to be a matter of lightning striking right on a road course day. That's the only way I see him getting in. But in the end, I think most of our playoff contenders are set right now. We're going to get a couple more. But again, sadly, we're not going to get to a year of 17 winners. Mathematically, we still could, but it ain't going to happen. We're going to end up with fewer than 16 guys winning and somebody getting in on points.
So I think ultimately the final whatever spots you want to call it is between Bowman, Ross, Ryan Blaney, Bubba Wallace, Chris Buescher, Joey Logano, Chase Briscoe, and Kyle Busch. Like that seems to be the clear
said like
tier.
8 guys though.
Yeah, I know, for 6 spots or 7, whatever. All but 3 of them are not going to make it, and that's
9 winners right now. So you got 7
that's me
left.
looking. That's me looking at the points of Ty Gibbs is plus 107 to the good, and then it's anyone under 60 points to the good, which means like if you have one bad race in the next 2 weeks, you're basically on the cut line.
Well, I'll ask you this: do you think any of those guys are going to win that you mentioned?
I think so. I think it's very possible. Like I think Ross could win. Blaney clearly can win. I think same thing with Joey. I would say the same. I would say basically every name other than Briscoe and Kyle Busch, I have confidence could win a race any week, just because of how good their cars have been this year. Like I that's kind of how I feel about it. That's what I'm saying. I'm just saying it's those 8 drivers for. Let me count the spots here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spots.
37.
All right, 5 spots. Those 8 drivers for the final 5 spots. Whether because at this point of the year, unless you win at Daytona, like I feel like you're not going to surprise someone unless it's like McDowell at a road course. But I don't know if that's going to happen. So because it's not, they have what, Sonoma and Chicago Street Course, and that's left, right, as road courses.
In Iowa, that's a track nobody's been to in Cup before, so you could argue that's a wild card, but I'll grant you that it's a short
I
track.
think that would be, if I'm Joey Logano, that's the race I'm targeting. Like, because it feels like Penske's figured out the short track package, and that's about it. Because I don't trust Penske at the 1.5 miles. They haven't shown it. Like Ford has shown improvement, but I would argue RFK has looked better at 1.5 miles and short tracks. But like the short tracks, or maybe just Gateway is a really good track. that's where I feel it. I'm at this point with this. Like, I would not be shocked if Joey Logano missed the playoffs. He hasn't shown the consistent speed, and he's been, it's not like he's had bad luck. Like, there are some weeks where he's just not there. Like, the speed is not there, and I just think ultimately you have 8 guys for the final 5 spots, and you're going to have to, execute flawlessly and maybe win a race, or hope that, a Josh Berry or a Michael McDowell or a Noah Gregson don't, jump up and win a race. Because ultimately, it's 8 guys for 5 spots. And I think the guys that are in there right now, I have the most confidence in, because I look at it the most tracks we have left are 1.5 miles. And it feels like all the cars you think are contend for the 1.5 mile wins are in the playoffs right now. And ultimately, because I think 2311 really good at 1.5 miles. RFK has shown they're really good at 1.5 miles. Same thing when it comes to, Alex Bowman. And I trust Ross enough to find enough speed. Like, he was really good at Nashville. So that's kind of where I sit. Davey, you can wrap this one up, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying there. And to a certain extent as well, I mean, I'm just looking at the races that we have left here. So Sonoma, that's a road course. You could argue that lends itself to a potential surprise winner. Iowa, first time there for everybody, maybe. Loudon, Almirola won a couple years ago, up in the air. Nashville, I would say that kind of lends itself to the normal players being up front. Chicago, second time there, you don't know. Pocono, potential fuel strategy there. Indy, first time back on the oval in the next-gen car. Richmond, JGR Hendrick, probably going to dominate there. You got Michigan, which sometimes is a fuel mileage race, and then Daytona and the chaos to wrap things up there. So again, I mean, you can fit the narrative however you want to, right? With, oh, well, this lends itself to a potential surprise winner because of fuel strategy, or first time there, or first time here. I don't think that it's that cut and dry, though, Massie. I feel like the good guys are still going to be good, and you may get another surprise winner in the vein of an Austin Cindric or somebody like that. But I think for the most part, you're probably going to get 1, 2, maybe 3 more winners in the regular season. I point to Truex. I'll point to Blaney as guys that are knocking down the door right now for sure. Other than that, though, I feel like, to Trey's point, Massie, the points is what I'm going to look at. And it's not sexy. It doesn't really sell a lot of tickets. But if you're Chris Buescher, Bubba Wallace, Ty Gibbs, you may have to be points racing in the last 5 races of the regular season if you want to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm going to circle 3 guys for 3 tracks. First is this weekend, Michael McDowell, Sonoma. If he doesn't win that, I don't think he's going to make it. The other, Joey Logano, Iowa. I can still see him winning somewhere else, but that's the one I got circled for him. The other one, Kyle Busch / Austin Dillon, Daytona. RCR is always good at Daytona, and I could see them pulling off. I mean, Austin Dillon did it just a couple years ago, so that wouldn't shock me. So outside of that, I don't see any huge, upset. Somebody outside winning their way in.
Yeah, we will see how it plays out. I mean, Davey mentioned Chicago. I think the favorite for Chicago, I think you throw out Chicago, because I bet I'm going to pick the favorite for that race, in my opinion, and it's the guy we're about to talk about who got a win at Portland, and will be the defending race winner, Shane Van Gisbergen. SVG is just way easier to say. He could make some history, Massie, and we kind of wanted to touch on. I feel like no one is talking about this, and it's something we wanted to highlight.
Yeah, SVG won his first career NASCAR Xfinity Series race this past weekend in Portland. He now has a win in Cup, a win in Xfinity. So all he's missing is that Truck Series win, and the fastest to do so, to win from your first win in a national series to winning in your third national series, is Kyle Busch. You can see right there the graphic that Luis Torres tweeted out. It's 478 days is how long it took Kyle Busch to do it. If you factor in Kyle's first start in a national series, not just his first win, it's longer. I don't know who would have the record, because Kyle actually started in 2001, and then they told him, come back when you're 18. But SVG, his first win in NASCAR, his first start in NASCAR, was less than a year ago. I don't know how many days ago that was, but if it was less than a year ago, it was less than 365 days. See how I did that? So if they could put him in a truck series race soon and he could win that thing, he could break Kyle Busch's record for winning in all 3 series, be the quickest ever to do so. I looked it up. He's got 19 starts. And Mike Neff, you looked up for us earlier, it was 57 starts is how many it took for Kyle Busch to get all 3. So he's still got quite a bit of time. He doesn't have any truck races on his schedule. It's a problem. Trackhouse, get him some truck races. But what do you guys think? Are they gonna put him in some truck races? Is he gonna be the fastest to get a win in all 3 series?
I'd be willing to bet Spire will put him in that 7 truck the next time we go to a road course. I don't see anybody clamor to put SVG in for an oval track race because he hasn't made any kind of inroads yet to look like he's a threat at that place. But, we get hopefully a couple truck races again on road courses next year, and that'll give him a couple opportunities to do it. And I could easily see Spire putting him in there. But again, he shows more and more promise. He's figuring these cars out. He's learning, the ins and outs of the aggression levels. And we even heard him talk about that at the race this weekend, that he's getting more of a feel for the amount of aggression that goes on these restarts. And once he really gets his arms wrapped around that to where he's not losing a spot or 2 every time we have a restart and having to gain them back, he'll be able to get up front. And again, you get him at a place like Martinsville in a truck where straight line braking is really important. That's what he excels at. So that would be a kind of a place where you would get him in there. But the other tidbit I wanted to throw out there, number of starts to get your 3rd win. Kyle Busch was 57. You mentioned SVG is at 19. Carl Edwards actually did it in 42 starts to be a winner in all 3 of the National Series. So he did it in fewer starts, but it was a longer chronological amount of time than it was for Kyle Busch. Like you said, since they started Kyle at 18. But you get SVG on Martinsville in a truck, there's a possibility.
I could see that, given that AJ Allmendinger, who obviously is SVG's teammate at Colleague, and he's really good on road courses. He's long been pretty good at Martinsville, and he's long said that it's because it kind of drives like a road course in terms of how you modulate the brake and the throttle. Now, obviously, with a next-gen car, that may be a little bit different on the Cup side, but we're talking about a truck, so that may be apples to oranges. In terms of this year, there's no more road courses in the Truck Series for 2024, so the best logical chance of Shane being able to do that in a truck is obviously on a road course, but there's no more of those left. So that kind of is at the window. To Neff's point, I feel like Martinsville could be a good potential logical place for him to maybe get some more additional short track experience. If you guys remember back last year, he raced at IRP when he was back in the States for his 2nd Cup race at the Indianapolis road course. That was for Nice Motorsports in the Truck Series. I feel like the Spire 7 car could be, or 7 truck, could be a logical landing spot for him there. Obviously, the check's got to clear, though, and I'm not sure how that works in terms of what sponsorship he's bringing, if Quad Lock or WeatherTech was able to and willing to jump over to Spire a sponsor truck, or if Nice, maybe there's less of a check clearing process that needs to happen there and a better relationship that Trackhouse has there in the truck series compared to Spire, who I know that they have the charter situation. So, look, you asked me the question, can he do it? Absolutely. Do I think he's gonna? No, because he still doesn't have a lot of oval experience in anything. And he's the first one to tell you that, right? He needs to get better on ovals. And the way you do that is to gain more experience. Neff, you made a great point, and Shane said it himself. These restarts are an area that he really needs to work on. He's coming from a racing series down under where you are penalized for just touching somebody, just a little bit. And NASCAR, you're not encouraged to touch. You're encouraged to bump. You're encouraged to rub. You're encouraged to race, right? And we don't know what that's going to be like for him when he does that on a regular basis here in the States in the Xfinity Series. And we know the Truck Series does that to the nth degree. So if he's able to get a little bit more seat time, I surely think that it's doable. But I just think realistically, I don't think that that's a possibility for him this year, considering his lack of experience on the ovals.
Hey, he learned how to ship Jeb Burton already, didn't he? Send Jeb Burton a little payback there.
Did he get the dog food wrecked out of him like Jeb has promised in the past? I don't know.
Crocky, mate, that's insane.
That was a terrible accent.
I know that was terrible. It turned British. I will say this: the problem for SVG in the 7 car is I have a feeling, unless they put him in another truck, that they might just reserve every road course Inspire until he goes full time for Connor Zillage, and that's just as a good bullet. That I would argue that's just as good of a bullet in your chamber of your Spire Motorsports. Granted, both Trackhouse drivers theoretically. So there's already that relationship there, theoretically speaking. I think if I had to pick one, like let's say SVG gets one race and he's like, all right, I'm gonna try to win it to make this record this season, and it's only because it's kind of like the you throw some dice onto things. If I'm him, I'm picking Talladega over Martinsville, just because I think more like. I don't think you're beating Corey Heim or Christian Eckes on a short track. They're too good right now, especially at that Martinsville race, which would be the race before the championship. Talladega, I think it was the last couple of years. It's like Matt DiBenedetto, Brett Moffitt on a one-off
Tate
one. Tate Fogelman. Like he is way more likely to kind of just avoid the chaos until 10 laps to go, and he's going to have a shot to win. And I think he could do it. So that's like the only rate. Like, could he do it? Yes. Will he? I just don't see him getting in a truck. I don't think he cares. I think he wants to get to the Cup Series at this point. And for him, I believe it will be next year. He'll be full time for probably Trackhouse, and as the third, their third team because they're linked to the SHR selling, and we'll see what goes there. But ultimately, it would be cool if I think he should at least try. I mean, no one's talking about this stat, but I think he should at least let's say do Talladega and maybe the first Martinsville race in Coda next year, because I think Coda was the only road course for the trucks this year, and just see, and maybe he doesn't want to do a race where there's Xfinity that weekend. He doesn't want to do, which I think he's already done doubles. So I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at on this one. All right. Speaking of wheelmen, and maybe the best wheelman ever, Kyle Larson was finally granted a waiver this weekend, and it took over a week. Neff, you got more. Sorry, I forgot to check.
I just wanted to throw one more thing out for SVG. I want to see him win more races just because of kicking the rugby ball into the stands and doing a full-on Tokyo drift all the way around a road course, because that was one of the best celebrations I have ever seen.
You're right. He is a Kiwi. No, my bad. That was even worse. So, the All Blacks. Shout out to the All Blacks.
Eat your Vegemite, Trey. Maybe you get your states right.
That's so much better than me. All right, good job, Davey. I'm proud of you.
Low bar.
All right, let's move to Kyle Larson. So last week we talked about if Kyle Larson deserved a waiver, and we all kind of prefaced we all thought he was going to get one. We did not think it would take the whole week. We did not. NASCAR took a whole week with it. I felt like NASCAR was in their feelings a little bit, it felt like. So ultimately, my question for our final segment is, do you think NASCAR handled this waiver process by dragging it out so long where everyone was sitting there we know the answer is going to be yes. Your precedent set is too down the line. We all knew it was going to be a yes. Did NASCAR take way too long because they maybe had their feelings hurt how Kyle Larson picked the biggest race in the world over them? Neff, you can go first because I know you have 600 opinions about this.
I don't even know about that. My opinion on this, and it's not got anything to do with Larson, is you have now opened a Pandora's box that you're never going to be able to shut. What happens if Brad Keselowski decides he wants to run the battle at Berlin and they have weather come in and he doesn't make it to the Cup race that weekend? File for a waiver. You already gave it to Larson. You got to give it to Brad. What if somebody wants to go run the Oxford 250 and then it turns out they can't make it back for the Cup race because their flight's delayed? Apply for the waiver. You gave it to Larson. You got to give it to him. You cannot base it on the magnitude of the reasoning that they didn't come to the cup race. That doesn't fly. You have now set a precedent that you can pick any damn series you want to run over NASCAR, and they'll give you a waiver to come back and run for their playoffs. And that's where the Pandora's box problem is. Personally, I thought Kyle should have had the waiver because I thought he's running the double and it's good for the sport. But to keep from opening up this mess, which now, if I'm a driver, I'm specifically going to play that mess just to try to force their hand and have to give me that waiver. But you've opened up a box you did not want to open.
AJ Foyt is so principled, he would have never applied for that waiver. That's why Neff believes this way.
That's because AJ Foyt would have run it in the rain.
Yeah, I don't think he would have done that, but go ahead.
They're by himself, just running in the rain.
Massie, how do you think NASCAR handled this? Do you think they dragged it out? I have some conspiracy theories that we could get into about why they dragged it out so long. I could put my tinfoil hat on, but do you think NASCAR handled this by dragging it out so long?
I think the best conspiracy theory I've heard this week came from Denny Hamlin on his show Actions Gentlemental, where he said that they were so mad at Larson that they just were like, we're not. That's why they just called it right there. They're so mad at him. But look, first off, I'll say I'm glad they got the ruling right, because I just think it would have been so bad if they denied him the fan reaction. Like NASCAR Twitter would have exploded. You could have lost fans over it. And you could have lost Larson over it. Like maybe him and maybe he decides he's going to take the rest of the year off and go do dirt racing or more IndyCar or something. So I think, for the good of the sport, it was good to put him in there. Them dragging it out, like it in the moment, it's like, that's annoying. In hindsight, I don't really care. If you're mad at someone, you want to make them sweat a little bit. I kind of respect that a little bit. But I do agree with Neff that it does open Pandora's box. But, I mean, they already opened it when they, gave Matt Kenseth the waiver because he missed the first 4 races when he was retired and came back to substitute for, coincidentally, Kyle Larson. But, yeah, the waiver thing, it's just, the rules need to change and get buttoned up in the offseason so that this is never an issue again. I would like to see some kind of way where, okay, if you miss a race, you got to be top 16 in points to make the playoffs. Some kind of deal like that, where it's like, oh, okay, well, this guy, he skipped races, but he's still so good that he was able to beat these other guys that have been here every week. Yeah, let that guy in the playoffs. Let your best drivers in the playoffs. So, I don't know. It's this whole... I really... They're in a tough spot with this whole thing, but they put it on themselves by having this whole waiver deal to start with. So, it's kind of funny to see how the waivers have blown up in their face, given that they've just watered them down over the years. But I'm just glad Larson will be in the playoffs. There won't be an asterisk on this season because I was telling people, what if they didn't let Larson in? He wins half the playoff races, wins Phoenix, and it's that's Denny finally wins the championship. Then everyone would be like, well, Larson was supposed to be champion that year.
Could you imagine?
They'd still have something over Denny. So I'm glad we won't have, because that would have set the sport back to 1950. We would have undone 74 years of progress. Because 1950, Bill France Sr., if you ran another series, he was going to throw your points out. Lee Petty should have 4 championships instead. We got Rex White, who's the only NASCAR champion not in the Hall of Fame, that's retired, that not in the Hall of Fame, and it's because it's a watered-down championship. So I'm glad we didn't revert back to the 1950s on this whole deal.
Yeah, hard to agree
Bill
there.
Rexford, not Rex White.
Okay. Bill, what was Bill Rexford?
Bill Rexford.
Rex White did win.
I know you both were alive when that championship happened, so it's
Rex
okay.
White won the first one, didn't he? First one ever?
The Red Byron.
No, Red Byron.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Red
they
Rex.
they were actually,
No.
Davey, as you know, they were both there that day when Baron, whatever his name is, got crowned as the first champion.
We're just
They were at the
making
meeting.
ourselves
They
look
were
dumb.
covering the meeting when NASCAR was formed in Daytona Beach.
Red Baron.
Yeah, they were actually at the
Red
Streamline
Baron
Hotel.
Pizza. It was red. It's same.
Yeah.
Red Baron Pizza.
Yeah, I was in the bar downstairs though.
Yeah. I'll say this. I mean, NASCAR got it right. I think this was the only correct decision to be made. And I don't know if there was any particular reason for having the decision go this long. I mean, Elton Sawyer pointed out today, and, he's going to join us on Sirius tomorrow morning as of this recording, that, there was a race over the weekend at Gateway that they did not really want to take attention away from. Depending on who you ask, that could have potentially backfired because that was one of, if not the topic of conversation at the racetrack, which is understandable. But, everybody has always said, including NASCAR, that these waivers are looked at and ruled on circumstantially, case by case basis. You look at the Chase Elliott situation and him getting hurt. They ruled that he would get a waiver for that. If that's the right or the wrong call, doesn't matter because that's the call that was made. They suspended him, they being NASCAR, and they gave him another waiver for that after they suspended him for something he did in their event. Eric Jones getting one this year for sitting out after injury. Think that's kind of a no-brainer. You get injured in a NASCAR Cup race and you have to sit out because of that injury. I think that's pretty cut and dry. The ones that have not gotten approved, be it for sponsorship woes and missing a race or substance abuse or legal issues, what have you, again, circumstantially, case by case basis. I do think it matters that this was Kyle Larson. I do think this matters that it was the Indianapolis 500. I do think it matters that Hendrick made every single effort and did everything in their power that as soon as the race at Indy ended, they tried to get him there as quick as possible. So I don't really buy into the thinking of, well, they would have done this for anybody. And just because it's Kyle Larson and it's the Indy 500 and it's Hendrick Motorsports and it's McLaren, they would have done this for anybody. They would have ruled the same way. I don't think that's true, guys. I just don't. I think the fact that Kyle Larson is one of the more popular drivers, one of the better drivers, Hendrick Motorsports and Rick Hendrick have so much equity and a huge stake in this sport. Garage 56, ever heard of it? Yeah, that was a pretty big deal for NASCAR. One of the only 4-car teams that's going to be in existence after this year and that's been around for decades and decades, and one of, if not the most successful race team in the history of the sport. That matters. Kyle Larson, a guy who's raising the tide of all motorsports domestically, whether it's on dirt, on asphalt, open wheel car, stock car, that matters. The Indianapolis 500 being one of, if not the biggest races in the world, regardless of what some people inside the NASCAR headquarters think, that matters to me. So I don't think that they handled it poorly, to be honest. I was waiting just like everybody else, saying, what's taking so long here? I mean, they got to give him the waiver, right? And then another day goes by, right? Like, I was getting kind of nervous because I do think that it would have set the sport back a little bit. And I know, Neff, I know your take, and I respect that, and I do see that point of view. I really do. But circumstantially, this is going to be a PR nightmare if they did not give him the waiver because of past precedent and the rulings that they themselves have had in the past. Now, Massie, to your point, I don't know if they're going to rewrite the rule in the offseason, if they're going to revisit it, or if they can kind of do just a classic, sanctioning body thing, whether it's the NBA, NHL, NFL, MLB, NASCAR, what have you, and basically just say, hey, if you submit a waiver and if you do something like this in the future, we're gonna look at it a little bit differently. Rules going to stay the same. Language of the law is going to stay the same, but it's our sandbox. You play in it, and just know that if you try to do this again, we may not be as kind. They could say that too. I don't know if people would necessarily agree with it, Trey, but it's possible. So to answer your question, I think NASCAR handled it all right. I'm sure in hindsight, they would have liked to come to a conclusion sooner and earlier, but there's a process that needed to be sought through. And, whether you like the ruling or not, and I know 3 people on here probably do, and one person probably doesn't, that's the ruling that we're going to go with. And to Massey's point, thankfully, there will not be an asterisk at the end of the season. That would have been bad.
The only thing that I want to throw in on top of this was the way Elton Sawyer made that statement today that basically said Kyle was there and ready to get in the car, and we did everything we could to get the race restarted. And if he'd been able to do that, then it wouldn't have mattered. And I'm like, that's not the rule. The rule is you got to start the race. He did not start the race. Elton's making it sound like if he'd have got in the car, then we'd consider that running the race. That's not the way the rule is written. So if you want to change the rule and have it be participate versus start, okay, we can go down that road. But the way he phrased that statement, I thought, again, was opening up another box like, hey, we can go out and go, jet skiing and water tubing for the first 2 stages and then come in and run the last stage of the race.
I would love to see you jet skiing. That would be a sight.
I would not, considering that you got one knee replaced, you're getting another. I think you should not.
I could kneeboard pretty good. I'll give you that.
There we go. All right. To wrap up this topic, I like I said last week, Rick Hendrick is not a dumbass. Jeff Gordon is not a dumbass. They knew this was going to get approved. They would. I think if I know NASCAR and Hendrick's like, we never gave them assurance. Yeah, that's some load of baloney. Like and I said this in a vacuum, he should have got the waiver because Kyle Larson over All-Star weekend and last week did more for NASCAR than any other driver, I would argue, combined. And that's including the fight. So at the end of the day, I think if a certain team's announcement didn't happen and everything going on with a certain negotiation, I think the waiver announcement comes last week. But NASCAR used the PR of the waiver announcement to kind of diminish the headlines of a certain team shutting down and a certain final offer being sent to teams allegedly. But we'll just leave that tinfoil hat thought there and let it soak.
You're the only one wearing that hat. Let the record show. You are the only one wearing that Reynolds wrap on your head.
I know someone who will mention might also be wearing that hat with me. I'm just saying.
I've got some of that foil on my head. I'll buy into that.
Thank you.
Well, you got no hair, so you got something.
True.
Hey, you got to protect yourself from the sun.
According to Fox's ticker, Larson took last week off too. So
Algar race, and he was in the 16. So
yeah.
All right, so let's break down the draft here, and I have to give a shout out to Caleb who gave me these perfect notes of the draft. So Brian Nolan had the worst week on record. So congratulations, Brian. You had 0 drivers in the top 20. Massie had the second best week on record. He's had the 3 biggest points weekends this season. He was the first to break 2,000. Tom had his personal worst week, and your boy had his personal best week because finally Zane Smith showed up and was in contention. He was top 20. Thank you, Zane. For finally showing up this week. But yeah, Massie, one of these scores is not like the other, and it's Brian Nolan.
If Bell could have won, I would have really be having a nice lead.
You really would have pulled away. Yes, you would have. You would have back-to-back weeks of sweeps.
But he didn't.
But he didn't. So he moved.
And that's why they run the whole race.
Yeah.
All 300 miles.
Well, technically, he didn't get a sweep. He got the sweep in the Coke 600 because they didn't run all the laps. Okay, Jenny, with an interesting question. We'll wrap up this. We got some little bit of time. Do you think after the length of time NASCAR might change? Yeah, we kind of touched on that, but do you think the rule gets changed? I could see something where it's like you get one freebie, like you miss one race for whatever reason. But that could be more complicated.
I don't know about that. I think Neff's point about needing to start the race versus make an active effort to participate in the race, or whether it's like, a stage or something, right? I think that is more realistic. Yeah, maybe. I
Half-
mean, it could be circumstantial.
Flip
you
it,
know, from
flip
track
it to like
track.
the rain rule. Like if it's another, make it halfway. Like you have to run half
Maybe,
the race.
yeah. But I think the wording that NASCAR had repeatedly was that Larson and Hendrick made every effort to try to participate in the event,
Which
and I
they
think
did.
that could be a potential change moving forward. Now, again, we don't know. Elton said, and I'm sure he's going to tell us tomorrow on TMD too, that they're going to revisit it in the offseason, but they don't anticipate the rule changing. We'll see, right? I mean, they don't want to be in this position again. I know for damn sure Hendrick, Larson, and if anybody ever attempts to double again, doesn't want to be in this position either. So it's always a risk that you assume logistically with, being an outdoor sport and Mother Nature being the, what that she is. It's always a risk. But I think, besides maybe just giving people a freebie, that would open up a Pandora's box of having Keselowski go run the Battle of Berlin, so-and-so go wakeboard on the lake when it's a nice day in Charlotte and it's going to rain in Texas. You know what I mean? So I think participation and the action of attempting to do so is the key here, rather than just saying, everybody gets a mulligan. It ain't golf. It ain't golf.
Yeah, that's true. All right. To wrap up the show, ladies and gentlemen, it's back. And most importantly, can one Tom Bowles get redemption?
Previously on Frontstretch Jeopardy,
I'm gonna do Daytona for 500.
we learn the legacy of Charles Moneypenny.
Shot in the dark, because I think this is correct. I'm not sure. Who is Harley J. Earl?
That is incorrect. I gotta give negative 500 to Dalton.
You didn't have to do that.
If Dalton's in the negative, does he get to participate in Final Jeopardy?
It is Charles Moneypenny.
Oh, come on!
Mr. lives in Daytona.
Charles Moneypenny.
It doesn't even seem like a real name.
That's not even a real name.
That's what Wikipedia said, so I'm going with it.
Oh, Wikipedia. Check this man's credentials.
Trey does math.
I can't do math. Oh, 400. I'm math's wrong. 1,000. Correct. I'm not the best at math. All right, now I gotta do some math. All right, so Caleb, you have 200 going into Final Jeopardy.
Trey, I can tell you how much I've got.
Tom, I
I
have
can also-
3,100. Is that right?
Me?
Yes.
At 3,100, I have 2,400.
Okay, I'm bad at math. All right.
Tom gets questions right.
Oh my God. All these people, $100, $200 questions. Come on. I'm going to go race teams for 500. What is All-Star Motorsports?
I will take that as it's all-star racing, but that is good enough. So 500 to Tom Bowles.
I think it's Charlotte.
That is correct.
Yes.
What is Charlotte
Yes.
Speedway?
16.
That is correct.
Oh my God. I pulled that one out of my ass. I'm not going to lie.
But in the end, he blew it.
This town hosted one NASCAR Cup Series race in 1964, which was won by Fireball Roberts. This town is best known for a famous golf tournament. And
So
that is
anybody
correct.
who didn't have that answer can now just say Augusta and get it right. I put it down also. Yeah, there it is.
I'm very annoyed with myself. 2000, what is Myrtle Beach?
That is incorrect.
Oh my God!
This game is rigged. Trey. He goes from first to tied for second. Our winner, Mr. Dalton Hopkins.
How did that even happen? I don't
I don't know.
I was down
I know
300.
the golf tournament gave it
This is
away.
the ultimate underdog story.
Listen, I should have thought of the Masters.
So there we have it.
Tom
Frontstretch
Bowles
Jeopardy.
is a certified buffoon.
I
What
know.
are you talking about?
I called him the
What?
I called him the James Harden of front stretch.
Oh
I
my
called him
God.
the James Harden of front stretch.
What is that?
Yeah, so next week, Michael Massie finally gets his wish. He gets to participate in Frontstretch Jeopardy. Davey Segal, I think he can do next week, so he'll
I'll clear my
participate.
schedule, boys. I can't wait for that.
And Tom Bowles looking for redemption. Will he have it? You have to tune into this episode.
You can't come
next
back
week.
from that. You can't.
It's
come
gonna
back.
be a fun one. Will I make mistakes in math and the presentation? Absolutely.
Can you phone friends
Sure.
on this?
No, it's Jeopardy. luckily, I have Caleb Barnes, who another round of applause for Caleb, who's helped me out tonight, who put that video together. He killed it. And,
Great VO, Caleb.
Luckily, he will be able to do the math for me, and he is way better. Hopefully he's better at math than me. We'll see. But tune in next week. But Mike Neff, Neff Short Track, he writes for Frontstretch.com. Check out Davey at SiriusXM, Massie at _Massie22, and you can follow me at Trey Lyle VT. Tune in to Bring the Heat with Brian Nolan. He'll have Ed Jones on the podcast, as well as reacting to the action at the Lou this past weekend. For Mike Neff, for Davey Segal, for Michael Massie, my name's Trey Lyle. Thank you so much to everyone who listened. Jenny, thanks so much for commenting. Same for you, Noah. And if you're listening on the podcast feed, thank you. Leave that 5-star review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Like this video. Like our Facebook page. We out. Adios.